Hi everyone. So welcome to our channel, Thai Food for Tater. I'm going to be doing something a little different today. This is just going to be a one-on-one. So if you are new to our channel, you know that myself and Laura, we often do videos together, and but we also do some separate videos. So this is the first one that I'm going to be recording that's just me, and you know, a little more one-on-one with you guys. So if you've watched our introduction video, you know that one of the main things that we talk about, and ideally one of the main themes of our channel, is going to be our experiences with very specific and very difficult medical issues, medical treatments, and so for this video, I'm going to go into a little more depth about some of the things I brought up on in the introductory video. So this video is going to be about my diagnosis, so a little bit leading up to my diagnosis and the events that happened, you know, like right after the diagnosis. So for those of you, if you haven't watched the introductory video, like there's no need to. I can just kind of give you a quick recap of that. So in 2017, when I was 34 years old, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, specifically stage 2 of invasive ductal carcinoma. And so kind of leading up to that, let's see, that was in September. It was maybe March of that year that I had noticed like a lump in my breast, and I had no family history. I had no personal history. There's no family history of anyone having any type of cancer, let alone like any of the females in my family having breast cancer. And so I just figured, you know, being someone in my 30s, I figured, well, there are so many things that it could be that's not cancer. I mean, not that you can't get cancer, not, like you don't have to have a family history, but it's, you know, it's a little less common. But I just assumed, okay, it's probably like a cyst or, you know, a fibroid. It's like, it was probably, in my mind, I'm like thinking it's probably not cancer. But also I've always been someone who's been fairly vigilant about my own health. So I went to the doctor, and now I'm a PhD student at university, and I'm also a part-time instructor at 2 different schools. And so I was really lucky that I could just go like to the school health facility. So I went in and I was speaking with a nurse practitioner, and I told her my concerns, and, you know, I had her feel the lump, and she said, well, I feel what you're feeling, but given, you know, your health, you know, family history, she's like, I think the best thing we can do right now is kind of just wait a couple months. And if it changes, if it gets bigger, if it starts to become more uncomfortable, because I had, like, it didn't hurt or anything. I just had happened to feel it. And luckily it was on the side of my breast, on my right side. And so I thought, okay, you know, because I wasn't too worried about it. I wasn't too concerned. And this is probably common practice, you know. So I waited. Like I said, I want to say that was March or April. It was towards the end of the semester, mid to end of the semester. And so I waited through the summer. And but by like July, so only a few months later, I realized, like, this thing has definitely gotten bigger. And I even, like, at the time, like, well, this is how it's been for the last few years. I don't live in the same city as my mom, but, you know, a couple years ago, I used to be able to, based on where she lived, I could visit her fairly often. So it had been maybe like a few months between visits, and I'd had her feel the lump the first time, and then the second time I was like, feel this again. Like, does this feel bigger, or is it just me? She's like, this definitely feels bigger. And so then I got more concerned, of course. So I made an appointment, and I went back and forth in my mind too, like, should I go, should I? And I thought, well, you know, it's the beginning of the semester. I'd rather get this taken care of and have peace of mind instead of like stressing about it or wondering the whole semester, you know, just better to have peace of mind. Because I was like, you know, 95% sure that it was going to be nothing. And so I went into the doctor. I saw the same nurse practitioner, and she's like, yeah, this has definitely gotten bigger. I'm going to send you in right away for a mammogram. So she sent me in for a mammogram and an ultrasound in the same appointment. And I think I want to say I got in within like less than a week of seeing her. And so I went in, And they don't tell you anything there. Like they have to wait for like the person to read the imaging, and then they contact your doctor, and then they and so I got a call. I think I want to say like I had the imaging done on a Friday, and it was like Monday or something. It was a very quick turnaround. I got a call from my doctor's office, and they said, we don't want to scare you, but the mammogram came back as suspicious, which doesn't, like, right away they were like, it doesn't mean that it's cancer, but there's something happening and we need to, like, find out. I was like, okay. And I already knew that in my mind. I'm like, well, I know something's there. So of course the mammogram was going to come back as suspicious because there's clearly whatever it is, there's clearly something there. And so they sent me in for a biopsy. And so, like, if you've had one of these done for multiple, not even just cancer or breast cancer, if you've ever had a biopsy done, like, they'll tell you what's uncomfortable. We're gonna numb you. And I know everyone's experience can be very different. And for some people, it's like, oh, it barely hurt. Mine was not that. It hurt a lot. And also when they, like, the doctors, I would say in my experience along my whole journey, my cancer journey and treatment journey, I've always had professional and kind and knowledgeable medical staff at every level. That's been I feel very fortunate that has been my experience. But so I'm in this, I'm getting this biopsy, and there was, the physician and then her assistant, and they gave me, I want to say lidocaine. I feel like that's what it was, to numb me, because they had to take, because the imaging had also shown there's something weird or suspicious going on in my lymph nodes. And so they had to take a biopsy from my lymph nodes and my breast. And I'm thinking, okay, that's 2 areas. They're going to do 2 biopsies. I was wrong. I think it was 11 different areas. Now, because they're trying to get as much information as they can, but it really hurt. And like, basically it's this needle, like in my experience with the breast biopsy, they inject this needle that has this little like thing at the end of it that basically takes a chunk of the breast, and they've numbed me, and so I didn't really feel the initial insertion of the needle. But when they did this little thing, like internally, they clipped off this little piece of the cancer, I felt this like pain just rush through my whole chest, like across, and it was brief. It was maybe 2 seconds, but it hurt so bad. And I kind of laughed and was crying, and I was so surprised. And they're like, are you okay? And I said, no, that really, really hurt. Obviously I'm thinking, do what you guys have to do because we need answers, but also that really hurt. Like, that really hurt. And so I'm thinking, okay, I only have to do 1 more. And they're like, no, we have to do quite a few. And I'm like, oh God. Like, so they're like, we're going to give you some more numbing stuff to numb the pain. I'm like, okay. So they did that. They injected me again. And then, we waited a few minutes, but then they also said, sometime with the lymph node area, they told me, if we can inject the stuff to numb it, it's almost as painful as the actual biopsy, because the lymph node area is just so sensitive on everyone. She's like, so we're not really going to give you any more. I'm like, at that point I was like, I was already in pain. I was already crying. And I at this point, this is one of the first diagnostic things I had done that was uncomfortable. And so in my mind, I didn't know what the next 3 years were going to hold for me. So I'm thinking, this is really uncomfortable. It really hurts, but let's just get through it. Do what you guys have to do. I understand it can't be perfect. It's not going to be painless. And so they do all these, and the ones in the lip, oh God, they hurt. They hurt so bad. And I had taken an hour off of work, and luckily I only worked about 3 blocks away. Just oddly enough, coincidentally, about 3 blocks away from this facility where I was getting this done. And I told my boss and my coworkers, I'll be back in an hour and a half. They're like, no, take the day off. And I was like, no, I'll be back. Because in my mind, I'm thinking it's going to be a quick thing. I came back to work, and I was like, I was in my office, and I'm like, I'm going to put my head down. And I ended up falling asleep. And they were like, of course, why didn't you just go home? And because in my mind, I'm thinking, this is going to be a nothing thing. I don't want it to interrupt my life. Little did I know, what was going to happen. And so, and I had these horrible bruises on my breast and my arm from this biopsy. It was horribly painful. So after that, I got home, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get these results fairly soon. And it was very quick turnaround from that too. It was maybe 3 or 4 days. I think, if that. Like, it was very quick. And I get a call, and I'm waiting now at this point. I'm waiting to hear from my doctor. And I get a call from my doctor, and they said, we need you to come into the office. Can you come in, like, now? And I was like, fuck, like, this is not good news, right? And so I called my mom, because, you know, people in my life were all waiting to hear, like, my mom, the boyfriend I had at the time, my close friends, you know, a few family members. They all knew that this was kind of a thing that had been going on for the last, like, 2 or 3 weeks. And so they all knew I was kind of waiting. And so I called my mom right away, and I told her, like, they want me to come in right now, which means it's not good news. I don't know what it is. It could mean that it's something benign, but they have to remove it, so we need to schedule it. It could mean cancer. It could mean, like, who knows? Like, all I know is that it's probably not good at this point. That they're asking me, they're not scheduling an appointment for me to come in next week. They're asking me, can I come in right now? And so I you know, she's like, okay, she's trying to stay calm, you know, because she's like in another state, and I'm freaking out, but I'm like, okay. And I had big plans that day. I mean, like at school. So in the lab that I'm part of as a PhD student, we have like this open house we do like once a semester, where we have like, you know, all the undergrads come in, and we have all the labs open in our department, and we show them what we do in the labs, and we try to get people, the other students, involved, and maybe encourage them to like take courses in our department. And so it's this whole thing. We have a whole setup, and you know, I was going to bring snacks for our labs. The students, when they came in, they have a snack, and we have a whole setup we have to do before it starts. It's like a whole thing. And so that was going to be the majority of my day. And so I'm thinking, well, okay, this is obviously important, getting to the doctor. And my advisor, he had known what was going on too. And so I told him, you know, they want me to come in. It's probably not good news. And he's like, well, let me know right away. Don't even worry about the open house. We'll take care of it. And I'm thinking, okay. And so I go into the doctor, and my physician comes in, and she's got like this stack of files and papers and stuff, and she says, there's no easy way to say this, so like, I'm just gonna say it. You have cancer. And I think that like mentally, like, I had kind of prepared for the worst, but like so much goes through your mind when you hear those words. It's so hard to even now, 3.5 years later, it's hard for me to like put into words those feelings. Part of it's just like, part of it is that, at least for me, part of it was, okay, I've got the information, now what do I do? Like, what's the game plan? Because like, also, like, as a side note, like, I'm a scientist, so data, numbers, you know, game plan, like all of that very analytical perspective is typically how I handle a lot of things. And so in that, part of me was doing that, like, okay, bad news, but okay, where do we go from here? And then the other part was like, holy shit, I don't even know. It was just a giant question mark. It was like, well, I don't know anyone who has ever had cancer. I only know shit from movies. Like, what does this even mean? I feel like I was so blindsided, and I had no idea what was coming. And then, of course, then there's the other part that's just like, you know, you're thinking about stupid shit you shouldn't even be thinking about, like, what about my job? What about, like, you know, things are like, I literally am dying right now, and, you know, because that's, especially as graduate students, we're so, like, how am I going to write my paper this semester? Like, the things that you shouldn't even be thinking about in that moment. So I had like a million thoughts in my head, and, you know, I'm trying not to get upset, because I'm really trying to hear what she's telling me, because very fortunately she had this whole game plan, and she was like, you know, I've already set up an appointment for you to talk to a surgeon, to see an oncologist. And I was like, oh great, you've already set up all this stuff for me. And so I'm trying to hear the information she's giving me, because she's telling me about, you know, locations and phone numbers, and she had it all written down for me, but she's giving me a lot of information, and she's telling me, you know, based on the preliminary, they think it's stage 2, but the oncologist will double check all that and go over it with me. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, stage 2, that's not bad, but it's not good. Like, and also people can still die. So I'm like, I'm thinking, I need more information. And so she said, my suggestion to you is to not Google anything until you talk to your oncologist, because you're just going to go down like a rabbit hole of stuff that probably doesn't pertain to you. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to trust the medical professional. So I didn't look up anything, you know. But I had like a few days between then and meeting my oncologist, and I just, you know, it was just, I was so shocked how do you tell people, like, and so like my friends and family were waiting, and I didn't want, like, I was sitting in the room, the exam room, you know, and she left to go get a couple more phone numbers for me, and she came back in, and I had about 5 minutes in between. I told her I was going to make a phone call, and, you know, she's like, of course, of course. Well, I didn't want to I didn't really feel like talking in that moment, but I was like, I'll shoot a text to like a few people. But I didn't want to text my mother that I had cancer. And so I was like, who can I need to tell someone. I need to tell someone right now. I need to get this out. I just have to tell someone. And so I texted my advisor was the very first person I told who I had cancer. And I texted him, holy shit, I have cancer. And he was like, where are you right now? And I was like, I'm still in the doctor's office. And he was like, when you're done, come right to my office. And I was like, okay. And then I talked to the doctor a little more. She gave me more information, and also it was really great that they automatically set up for me an appointment the following day to speak with a counselor at the school, and that was really great. And so I had like 24 hours where I was able to kind of process, sort of. I mean, you know, for those of you watching who've ever been through this, it's like there's only, 24 hours. What have you really processed? And I'll tell you, like, and this might even be your experience too, like 3 years later, I'm still processing it, because so much of it, as you go through treatment, you're just dealing with it, you're not actually processing a lot. And a lot of bullshit comes out later that you realize, hey, I didn't process this emotionally or spiritually or psychologically, and now it's all coming out, and now my life's a shit show because, you know, I was just trying to get through it. I mean, that's for another video, but so, you know, I left the office and I called my mom right away, and I told her, and she was like, okay, you know, we're gonna get through this. And she was like, she literally was ready to, she was like, I'm packing my bags, I'm gonna come move in with you. And I was like, let's wait. Let me meet my oncologist, find out what's going on, find out the treatment plan, and then I'll let you know. And I'm probably gonna have you come stay with me for a bit, you know. And so my boyfriend at the time, I called him, and he happened to be on campus where I was. And so he met with me, and, you know, he was like, we're gonna get through this. And I was like, okay. But a lot of it was up in the air because I still had to wait to talk to the oncologist, you know. And so I think I had about a week, maybe a little less, when I first met her, and she was amazing. She's not currently my oncologist because she ended up leaving the facility that I had went through. But she was my oncologist for like the first like 2.5 years. She was amazing. And so I met her for the first time, and she was like, so I can imagine that you have looked up a bunch of stuff online. And I was like, I did not, because, you know, my other physician told me not to. And she's like, oh good, you're probably one of the first patients who's not done that. I was like, well, I don't need a bunch of bullshit online, like, you know, because I didn't know. It's not like I could, you know, look up a YouTube video or go to like, I didn't really know, and I didn't want to be bombarded with incorrect information, and I didn't really yet have an experience to where I could see, okay, what are other people, what is their journey, because it was like day one of my journey, you know what I mean? I didn't, and part of me, I think, just didn't want to know. I wasn't ready. Very soon after that, I was ready. Once I kind of got into the mindset, I was like, okay, now I can kind of join some support groups and all that. But in the first week or two, I was just like, I don't even know, like, this is a dream, you know? And so, but I met my oncologist, and she was really great. And she said, we're going to give you, based on your type. And that's when she told me, definitely stage 2, invasive ductal carcinoma, estrogen positive. And she said, this is all good news because, she's like, this is really good news because it's a fairly common type, which means we have a lot of research and treatment, like, and research behind it, and standardized treatment. And so I was like, okay, good. And so she said, what we're going to end up doing with you is the trio. Not to scare anyone who maybe you're just starting this journey and this is your trio that you have to go through, but a lot of us refer to it as the poison, cut, burn trio, chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. Because not everyone who has cancer, whether it's breast cancer or not everyone who has cancer has to have all three. Sometimes you just have surgery and radiation. Sometimes you just have radiation. Sometimes you just have chemo. But for many of us, you have to have all three. You know, it depends on the type, the location, like a bunch of different stuff. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, wow, it's a lot. You know, I was like, radiation. I'm like, I didn't know. Like, I kind of knew what chemotherapy was and kind of knew what radiation was, but I was about to find out, you know. And so she's like, we're going to do chemotherapy first, to hopefully, you know, reduce the size of the tumor, and then surgery to remove it. And it had metastasized to my lymph nodes. I forgot to mention that. So it already started spreading even at stage 2. I mean, that's one of the markers of stage 2, but like it wasn't spreading super far, but it definitely had gone into my lymph nodes. Even though the mass itself was small, it was on the lateral part, or the outer part of my breast. So it was really close to them anyway. And so I started chemotherapy very quickly after that. But I'm going to save chemotherapy for another video, but I will say, to kind of wrap up, well, not wrap up necessarily, but I guess part of the treatment, but more part of the diagnosis part, kind of pre-chemo, was I had to get a chemotherapy port put in. And so I was like, what's that? You know, and chemotherapy port was, I'll go into this in more detail in the next video, but you can see my scar from it. Basically, they don't want to inject constantly over the course of months into your veins, like directly into your veins. And so you get this thing put in under the skin that allows them to access your blood supply very quickly. And so they had me scheduled for that right away. So I got a lot of information on that first day. She's like, we're going to get you in, get this chemotherapy port placed. You're going to do your first chemotherapy about 4 days after that. And then we're going to go from there. And she told me you're going to need eight rounds of chemo. She told me the drugs. And at the time I'm thinking like, okay, 8, I can remember that. But then she's telling me the drug names, and I'm thinking, I don't even know what that means. Like, is that good, bad? Like what, you know? But then she tells me one of the drugs that you're going to be taking is called adriamycin, and it's one of the strongest chemotherapy drugs. So we have to send you in for an echocardiogram to make sure you have a healthy heart, because this can kill you. And I was just like, oh, Jesus Christ. So they sent me in for that, and it was just a lot. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, because I want to save some of this for the video on chemotherapy. There was one more thing I was going to say. I forget. But so we went over, at this initial meeting with my oncologist, she went over all this information with me, and we talked about, like diets and stuff and things like I didn't know. She's like, we encourage our patients to not eat dairy, not eat meat. And I'm a vegan, so that I was like, well, that's easy for me, but then I asked her like why, and she's like, well, just because the food's it can have a lot of hormones in it, it can be unclean, and because you're going to be starting chemo, like you have to avoid everything like that. I was like, okay. And she's like, and also no fresh fruits or vegetables. And she's like, it can be cooked, it can be boiled, it can be fried, it just can't be like I can't bite into a fresh apple. And so she said it's because, there was an exception. I could eat bananas were the exception, because any other food, like you often eat the outside of it. And she's like, so we just avoid anything that could possibly be unclean, like just avoid it. And you don't think about little things like that. Like I was like, oh yeah, I just want to eat salad. I love salad, by the way, but I was like, I just want to eat any salads or fresh fruit. But then you don't think, like, when you make a sandwich, what do you put on it? Lettuce, tomato, onion, and pickles were okay because they're processed, but lettuce, tomato, nothing fresh. I was like, oh man. And then you don't think about when someone says you can't have this, like that's the only thing you crave. So like for months, I just wanted an apple. I'd see people eating apples, and I always liked apples, but I wasn't like eating apples all the time. But like the fact that I couldn't have an apple, I was like, oh, but I wouldn't give right now for like a fresh apple. And I'm sure if I would have had one, I would have been fine, because I know other women in my support group were eating, their doctors had recommended different diets, but like I wanted to adhere to what my physician was telling me. And so, so she gave me so much information at that very first appointment. And there was something else I was going to say and I forget, but I think that's kind of it for the pre-diagnosis and diagnosis part of this video. I'm going to do a video on chemotherapy. I'll do a video on the surgery too. And I'm sure things I forgot on this one, I'll bring up in the next one and stuff. And, for those of you who are still here, who are still listening and watching, and hopefully you continue to watch the other videos that we post on this channel, I'd love to hear your guys' story, and, with cancer, specifically with breast cancer, there was one more, and I think I remember the thing I was going to say about being estrogen positive. So my cancer was estrogen positive, but of course, as a female, my body naturally produces estrogen. And so she said, once we finish all your treatment, we're gonna have to put you on estrogen blockers. And, I'm gonna have a whole video on that too about the medication, but just know, like, if you are watching this video and you've experienced a lot of this, you know what I'm talking about. If you have maybe recently been diagnosed or just starting treatment and you are watching this, like, I will say that none of this is meant to scare you. And everyone's experience is different. You might end up having, minimal pain, minimal discomfort in your treatment, and you might have more than I did, but I just want to kind of, for all these videos, I'm trying to be as real as possible because I didn't have anyone to tell me some of this information, most of it, when I started, my treatment. You have the doctors and the nurses who are always amazing. And they have a list of information they'll tell you, but at least not mine, had never been through it. So you need someone who's been through it to tell you, like, what it's really going to be like and what to prepare for. I had no way of preparing for this emotionally, spiritually, like in any way. And I wish I would have had that. And because, my whole life kind of imploded after everything. So, okay. So that's, kind of the story of my diagnosis. And, oh yeah, actually one more thing. So they sent me in for genetic testing. And I was negative for all, I was like the genes like BRCA1, BRCA2, like none of those were like, turned on for me genetically. And I had them do like the whole spectrum of like all these different genes that are associated with any other types of cancer. None of mine were positive. And so basically the doctor said, well, when that's all coming back negative and you don't work in an occupation where you're like around cancer causing, materials, there's no way to really know. And she said, we're seeing more and more women in their 20s and 30s coming in than we used to see. It used to be like 40s and 50s. And, she's like, there's no way for us to really know. It could be food. It could be, the air we're breathing. So that was like, oh gosh, Okay, so I'll see you guys on the next one. And I'm probably just going to film it right after this. I'll be wearing the same outfit. And, thanks for listening.